Okay.
My little grandson has come in to join in.
Is he going to be a naval architect of the future, Carey?
Possibly, but it's a long way in the future. He's still a bit small. Yes, I wanted to make some general comments because fiberglass, or learning about fiberglass, is in some ways the same about learning about steel or aluminium or timber. That is, it's a hands-on job requiring personal skill of the laminators. It doesn't require personal skill of the surveyor, but the surveyor needs to be able to assess what level of skill has been used. So there you are, and you go aboard this fiberglass boat, you look at it. First of all, you've obviously got to know which bit you're looking at, but you're going to get on top of that anyway. But when you look at a laminate, someone who's experienced or very experienced will look at it and tell you all about that laminate straight away. You just look at the back of the laminate and say that's very good or that's dreadful or whatever it is he thinks. That will come to you with experience. Get down there on the boats and look at them. Go out and do surveys with somebody who knows what they're doing. And that will come to you in the end. Alternatively, you can go and find out more about laminating by going and working in a laminating shop for a while, or I don't know, going and getting a kit of GRP from your local marina and taking it home and having a go yourself. Okay. To actually cover the broad view of it, if you go onto YouTube, there are columns of sites which show you laminating, laying up boats, laying up other sorts of boats, doing a repair, what osmosis looks like, every single feature of it. Please go on there and please spend a whole day looking at those pictures. Last point, get yourself, can you see that, or is it back to front? It's back to front. It's called.
No, it's good. It's
good. It's good for you, is it?
Yeah.
You can see it. Surveying fiberglass sailboats. Never mind about the sailboats, it does any boats, right? Sailboats, it does have a section about rigs and rigging, but you can ignore that until you do rigs and rigging. But this actually talks you through a survey on a fiberglass boat as done by somebody who knows what they're on about. Surveying fiberglass sailboats. The chap's name is Henry C. Mustin. He's American, but I'm sure you'll be able to cope with that. It's a thoroughly good book, and it takes you right through it, beautifully written, and it's thoroughly correct. The other range of books you need are those ones. Hugo Duplessis, Fiberglass Boats. Can you see that? Fiberglass boats. As I look at the picture there, it's back to front, but you're saying that it's all right for you.
It's all good, Carey. It's all good.
Okay, okay. Hugo Duplessis. Both of these books and the one I'm just going to show you are available on Amazon secondhand this morning. I know it cost you 20 quid or something, but Duplessis is the best author to read. I mean, there's hundreds of others, but you will get on better with this guy. And
he was an IIMS member, Carey, for a number of years and passed away last year. So
I believe that's the case. Yes, he passed. I didn't know he was an IIMS member, but he did pass away last year. It's a shame because he was a clever bloke. And that one I have there is the Glass Fibre Handbook. I think I saw one on the web this morning for 14 quid or something. It really is good. You need one of each of those, and of course you need the IIMS handbook. That's probably an out-of-date version, but there it is, Unit 25. Okay, have that and read it because it is very, very good. Now, if you were able to study all those things that I've mentioned this morning, you would be beginning to be a bit of an authority, but it takes a few years to get on top of that. Now then, that's the end of my lecture. Off you go, ask me questions.
Carey, Paul Hatch. I recently did a different module, and I was asked to find a layup schedule for fiberglass for a typical yacht. I had great difficulty finding that on the web. Could you give me some indication where I could find that sort of information? Typical layup schedules for fiberglass?
You've made a good point there. It is very difficult to find those indeed, or quite how they work or what they look like. But please drop a note to Lorna and she will pass it on to me. I have got on that computer there dozens, either hundreds probably, of layups that I've done during my lifetime, or other people, other naval architects did, or whatever they were that related to boats. And I will try and run one off for you if I can find something suitable. But what they look like is a picture of the hull or the deck, or whichever bit it is you're talking about, with patches of shading on them, and a lot of notes all down the side saying 9 ounces by this, by that, and CSM by this, by that, and all that kind of thing. There is no mention on them of what the actual polyester is, because the laminators already know that. What they do is they're there in their workshop and they go into a kitting room or to a kitting table and they get a kit of glass, cut glass. They may cut it themselves individually, but very often it's done by somebody else because the boss wants to try and keep a line on the cost. They will have a great big box, huge great box, with all the cut glass in it and a bit of paper with various notes on it. And they will take that off and they'll start sloshing that inside the hull, deck, molding, whatever it is. Okay? But do that I said, Paul, and I will try and send you one. But you will not find one on the web because manufacturers do not release that information for several reasons. The first reason is because they have to sit and do it. It's something to actually do. And secondly, because they tend to get criticized for it and they don't want that. Okay?
One other question there. In the event that you have to look at a burn test for fiberglass layup,
a burn test.
A burn test. You know, basically burning down the laminate to see what the makeup was, which is the other way, I presume, of finding what the layup was in a particular area.
You won't find out anything at all. What you'll find if you do that is you've got a mess. The polyester will burn, and it will leave slightly melted, messed up, curly bits of I don't know, glass fibers, and it won't really tell you anything at all. If you want to find to try and make a gauge of what a laminate was after it's been laminated, you will not be able to. It's not really like that. If you sawed a line across it and looked at the edge, it's not like looking at laminates at a piece of wood. As the laminator works his material, he's sloshed it in the hull and he's working away on it, the binder in the glass starts to break down. And as the binder breaks down, the individual, each individual thing of glass is like a bundle of fibers. They're all bundles. And as he works it, that will break down into individual fibers, which will curl up, for want of a better word. They'll go into a curly pattern. When you look at the back of the laminate, an experienced guy will look at it and you'll see that it's got that nice characteristic swirly pattern. It's all broken down there and it's all just an even amount of glass, hopefully, all through the thing. Even if you had a join in the middle, you can't see it very well. Sometimes, of course, they lay it up to there and then come back tomorrow morning and lay some more on, which is bad practice because it doesn't stick very well.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you know, you can't tell.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry, Taps, you want me to talk a bit more generally, or would you rather?
Yeah, no, keep chattering, Carey. I'm sure questions will come. We might just talk briefly about the unit, perhaps, and what you are expecting to see from students when they are doing that unit, if that's okay.
About the unit when you come to sit and do the exam paper, or when you read?
Yeah, some of the tasks and I'm conscious people always want to know how long the assignment should be. We've had this discussion before, but what is it you're looking for from students?
When you come and Unit 25, here it is, the exam paper. Shouldn't show you this before you had it go. But never mind. It's got a question here, which I won't show you, about it shows some pictures of the inside of a small yacht, which has suffered a breakdown, and it asks you to explain about it, right? You are supposed to go there, as you would as a surveyor, and look at it and say, oh my God, this has happened and that's happened. Now, you need to, when you start to do it, first of all, research it a bit. Don't take the view that you already know the answer to that. Just check it out a bit, because you don't necessarily know the answer to that. That's why you're doing this, paper. You then need to answer everything that it blooming well asked. What did it ask? Oh, it just says explain what you believe is taking place in the structure. So that's not too difficult. Some of the other questions are a main question, a number of sub-questions. You've seen that, haven't you? For God's sake, mark out the question and each of the sub-questions. I don't know, highlight them or something and answer each one. If you haven't answered part of the question, the assessor, well, me, is stuck. Might say you've written a brilliant answer here, but you haven't answered that bit there. And that's what the requirement of the exam paper is. Okay. Read the question, answer what it asks, not what you think it asks. Okay, good bit there. All the questions in this paper are indeed pretty straight. Well, as a whole, question 4 is about osmosis. Funnily enough, osmosis is the easiest thing to research, because ordinary people who own the boats want to know about that. They will come and read about it and misunderstand it, I suppose. But I don't know, some of the other units are more difficult to understand. There's nothing in this paper that you couldn't go on the web this morning and find the answer there somewhere. But obviously you've got to know what to look for.
Can I ask you about surveying GRP repairs? I was at a boatyard with Paul Homer, I don't know, a few months ago now, before lockdown, and we were stood by the side of the hull, looking down the length of the hull.
Yep.
Paul said, can you see all those repairs? Well, you couldn't see them if you were standing facing the hull, or it was much harder to see. But when we stood at the aft and looked down the side of the boat, there were 3 or 4 areas that looked wrong. And
we had built this very nice boat, which we built for this millionaire, and it had had a bit of an accident when it came out the mould. It stuck. It's stuck. Stuck is a word that anybody who wants to know about fiberglass, where it sticks in the mould, and that had pulled a great lump of the gel coat out the side of it when they prized it out with great big levers, right? And they come along and done a perfectly respectable repair on it, perfectly respectable repair, and it looked fine. There it all was, this beautiful boat. And then they delivered it to the south of France, which is where his villa was, and it went past in front of him on its trailer. And oh my God, this repair stood out like a map of France or something. It was a completely different looking piece of boat. And the problem was the difference in level of the ambient light in the Mediterranean from the ambient light in dull old England. This applies all across the world, that if you put a different thickness of gel coat, it will show from the outside, particularly if, as Mike says, you go along and watch it carefully. Now, if you've done a repair, the actual surface will have been rubbed down and polished. So it's not the same as the wax polish finish that came off the mould. From square on, it'll look exactly the same. But if you look along, particularly to certain lights, it will suddenly look different. Gel coat is a damn nuisance. And every single building that comes out has some damages or nicks or blisters or something in it. And everybody employs a repairer who goes around repairing it. But pots of resin and little pots of gel coat and a pot of wax to go with it. These damn things certainly do show up, but usually a repair is about the size of a 10p piece, if that. Some of them smaller. But if you are a surveyor and you're called in to do something about it, you can only draw their attention to it. If the lads have got to carry out a big repair on it, like, for instance, every few years we get a great storm or something, and all the boats break off their moorings and they blow up the harbour here, up to the harbour wall, and you can go up there and see all these boats lying in a great big heap. And people go and buy them, and because the insurance company's written them off, go and buy them and take them away and repair them, which, if they are clever people, you know, capable people who work in the industry, they can do. And they probably make themselves, I don't know, 10,000 quid doing it or something like that. But the gel coat finish will never, ever match. It's not possible to do it because you've got different thicknesses there. Gel coat is naturally much thicker in pigmentation than any resin is. You often put pigment into the resin. Like the resin's clear when it comes out of the tin. Got this big tin on trestles there with a tap on the end. The lads go on, fill up a bucket of resin, and they will often put so many cc's of white or whatever the colour of the gel coat is, for the very reason that it stops that happening. If you've got a white colour behind the white gel coat, you can't see the difference in the depth. Does that help? Anyway?
Yes, but as a surveyor then, if you're looking at a fault, how do you know if that's been a repair? How do you know it's been repaired effectively, or would you advise further advice or seek further advice? I mean, that's the surveyor's job.
If a boat has been repaired, I would expect normally the owner to tell me that, that it had been up against the harbour wall, had been rammed by the Coast Guard or something like that. And when you went on the outside, particularly if it was, I don't know, suppose it's in January, right? And the ambient light isn't very good anyway. So it's quite hard to see anything on the outside, particularly if the boat's actually been used a bit and it's got a light film of, I don't know, sort of stuff that boats get a light film of on them, salt and sea dirt. But if you went round on the inside, what you'll find there is that you can't see the inside at all because it's behind some other unit or behind furnishings or behind this, that, or the other. And you have to poke about. It's a very good idea to have a little torch. And if you've got a nice camera, nice digi camera, or even a phone, if I stick that in the dark there and fire it, the flash will go, and I'll get a pretty good view of what's inside there, even if it's up around that dark bit up around there. Now, you can now see easily if it's been repaired. It'll look quite different. It'll look the glass will look newer or different or a different colour or whatever. It'll be obvious, blindingly obvious. You wouldn't have to be a surveyor to notice it. Your auntie could notice it. That's if it's had repairs. And from that, you look at it and say, oh, boat's had this, that, or the other done to it. And you'd straight away start looking at the bulkheads roundabout, looking at the other units, and looking how particularly the taping in has been done, because the taping in is done after the thing's been laid up. They come along with a bulkhead or whatever it may be that they're going to fit in there, another unit, and they tape it in with strips of glass like this, with the 3-ounce mat probably. And because it's polyester, the adhesion is poor, even if you sandpapered it really carefully. The adhesion is poor. Polyester is a lousy glue. If you come along and do it with epoxy, you will get a much better join altogether. Epoxy sticks like hell. But there you go. So the tapings will come off sometimes because they've been put in there with polyester, because that's what's easy for the lads to do. Doing it with epoxy is not easy.
I have a
epoxy,
question.
they've got to go and get the different material from a different place and come in here and do it. It's not like buying a tin of aerogel.
Tony.
Hi. I have a question regarding CSM. and epoxy resin.
Yeah.
Recently, I mean, there's several groups on social media sailing on a shoestring boat projects, and to be honest, I've had to leave these groups because I find the advice on them so frustrating and incorrect. But my question really relates to, as I just said, epoxy resin and CSM. Now, on the size, the binding is not always compatible with epoxy resin.
Correct.
How is the best way of finding out that the incorrect CSM has been used with epoxy resin?
As a surveyor, if
Yes.
you're making a recommendation, you must always point out that they must buy epoxy compatible top strand mat. It does not have the same, or it has a light amount of a different altogether binder in it. The ordinary CSM used in polyester has quite a considerable amount of binder in it, which makes it into a stiffish, I don't know, curtain-like material. I don't know how you describe it, carpet-like material, doormat-like material. But the epoxy compatible either have no binder in it at all, or only a very light binder which is suitable for epoxy. You can only well, if you were very experienced, you'd be able to tell by picking up one piece and looking at it when it was dry on the table, right? Somebody who knew their stuff would pick a piece up and say, this is polyester. All the cloths and braided mats and all those kind of things do not have any binder in them, or barely amount, so you can use them okay, but they are useless for making for taping in or making sticking onto the back of polyester in any way at all with anything. You use top strand mat to do that job, and you use one that's compatible, and you buy it from the supplier as being compatible. Comes in a big roll.
So coming in after repair, the easiest thing would be to maybe see the material itself that they've used. But looking at the repair, you're saying really it's only any experience that's gonna show.
At it, yes, because if the boat's been repaired and then used for 3 years, the inside of the laminate won't look much different at any different part of the boat. It gets a bit dirty and it gets a bit muddy and all that kind of thing. Nonetheless, an experienced person would tell at the time and say, this is epoxy and it's been done with the right cloth or the wrong cloth. If you use ordinary top strand mat with epoxy, which by the way is a damn and much harder to do than people seem to think, then the binder won't break down, and
I understand that.
a piece of unbroken down stuff. Yeah, it's quite strong. It'll be strong in epoxy. It'll be strong as all hell, but it's the wrong thing. Just a brief note about this. I used to have, for many, many years, a polyester boat factory where we laid up fishing boats. Hundreds and hundreds and lots and lots and lots. And there I would go in the morning to the dreadful smell of styrene, and there would be the lads working away, laying up boat hulls and boat decks and boat cabins and boat bits and boat parts and all that kind of thing, right? Using top strand mat and various woven rovings and all sorts of things like that. And that was what our day consisted of. Now I also had an epoxy factory where we made sailboards by vacuum injection. But because we had the epoxy on site, in the first place, we knew the lads up at Lotus very well indeed, because they made helicopter rotor blades like that, which makes me terrified and makes me not want to go on a helicopter. But we made those, and it's a different material altogether. It handles differently altogether. You do not find the two materials in the same workshop. So telling the lads to lay something up and do it with epoxy or repair it with epoxy, they'll probably ignore you. They'll just go on and use polyester because that's what they've got great big guns of over there. Okay.
Does that answer your question, Tony?
Using epoxy and polyester together, they are not the same material.
It does. I think my issue is with these the DIY brigade.
Yep.
And it's fine. It's ensuring when you come to survey a boat for a new owner or any other reason, that the correct material has been used with the correct resin. And I think obviously
unless it's something, unless it's been very badly done, you cannot tell. A surveyor, an experienced surveyor, would come and look and say, "I don't like the look of that laminate. It doesn't look good to me." But you can't tell it any other way. You can put a hardness test on it; won't really tell you anything.
That has answered my question. No, that you're not expected to tell. That's answered my question. Thank you very much.
Gary, I've got a question from David Jack. What form of FRP, GRP reinforcement or strengthening around chain plates or areas of high load stresses may occur?
Chain plates are a damn nuisance, but you've got to have them, and they suffer enormous stress. You've got to think in terms of the vessel, the boat, whatever it is, 50 feet long, 40 feet long, being hoisted up by its crane and then dropped 10 feet. That gives you some idea of the sort of loading that you get on chain plates. And in the old days, when I used to timber boats, you could stand on the quayside and look at people and say, "What do you think of that boat over there? So the bloody thing's hanging off chain plates. Look at it. The shear line isn't straight." Where years and years of winding up on the bottle screws and dragged and parted the planks at the top, parted the whole planking at the top, and made the thing not straight anymore. When you come to install those in a yard, right, there you are, you've made this nice sailboat, we hope, and you want to put chain plates in. Due to bitter experience with courts and people suing you, most of the companies will try very hard to spread the load over a very wide area. They sometimes put in struts. If the boat's a club racer or something like that, they put in reinforcing struts. And you spread the load over as much area as you possibly can. And you try to make sure that water isn't going to trickle down through the deck fitting outside, down on the inside, because that will cause the owner to write you a nasty letter. That's how that's done. And you can go and see it in where have you gone, Doug? Where have you gone, Doug? I don't know. I'm trying to find a specific bit in a book here, and you can guess that I find it easily when I'm not doing this, but right now I can't. But bit of research on that. Do a bit of research, and you will be shown how to do that very clearly. And what you do as a surveyor is you go and look at the boat and say, "I don't like that. That is not strong enough." Now, what is it not strong enough for? If it's like a usual owner, I had a yard, I had 198 boats laid up in that yard. I'd only ever seen in years 5 of the owners. The others never came near the boats, never came near the yard. They spent a lot of money on this boat. There it was, and we put it in the water every year and dragged it out every year and sent them a sizey invoice, and they just paid it, and that was it. Or didn't pay it, and we had to chase them up with a lawyer. Most of the people do not use their boats very much at all. Now, my dear good friend Kit is at this moment out there on his Bavaria. I don't know where it is. I think it's in the Mediterranean. He spends 6 months a year on his boat, sailing about. Well, he goes from here to the Mediterranean, across to the Caribbean, and back. And he's got a very nice wife, and it's a lovely life. He needs to have chain plates that are secure, because he goes out and tests the boat. The boat gets hammered all the time, but most Bavarians like those, like 64, I think, I can't remember what it is. Most of them rarely, if ever, get used. So you can't make too much fuss about cheap everyday boat. You've got to recognize the fact of how rich your customer is, what sort of boat he's bought and why, and make your comments in those terms. If you go along and recommend repairs to a boat, they cost the chap for £38,000. He very likely can't pay it, and that's it, all about it, in which case he won't pay you for a start. Those are ordinary surveying words, so it's a lifetime of experience.
Yeah. A couple more questions for you. David Jack says, thank you very much, very clear. So can you comment on potential problems that you might find on a carbon fibre hull?
Yes, I can. I have used a lot of carbon fibre, and I used to know the guy that got it all going in the first place. Very, very nice guy. And it was originally intended for, and still is very much used for, making the blades for jet plane turbines. It is not very compatible with polyester. It is much more compatible, but still not all that, with ordinary epoxies that you could buy. When they make into a turbine blade, believe me, they buy very special materials in and treat it in a very special way. Because it's got to stand enormous heat. If you took an ordinary bit of epoxy, it would catch fire as soon as you got it to a quarter of those temperatures. You will find, if you use it in club racing boats, racing dinghies, that kind of thing, that it is completely useless. You will not notice in a thin laminate that there's any carbon fibre in there or not. The only way you'll know about it is because how much it costs, which is exorbitant. If you want to make a thin, somebody come along and ask you to recommend stiffening up a laminate, ask the resin supplier and he will give you or sell you stiff resin. I've been caught like this, right? All those racing boats who made actually got out of the difficulty of buying this special stiff resin. And that's a child, a grandchild again. That is the way out of that. Do not mess about with carbon fibre if you can avoid it. You will get asked to come and see carbon fibre masts that have broken. And you won't be able to see a damn thing. Oh, it's broken. Well, that's it, it broke to me. And before it broke, which was about 1/10 of a second before it was broken, you still can't see anything. There's nothing to see there. There are no little cracks. There's no spots. It doesn't look a different colour. It doesn't look anything like that at all. They just break catastrophically, instantaneously. Nobody knows quite why. We used to make these ones. They were, you know, those boats that Arab sheikhs have. They're called dhows, I think. And they have a great big lateen sail with a huge, great lateen boom. I don't know, 78 feet long or something like that. And they would have those made with carbon fibre. That was brilliant when they worked because they were lightweight and they had a nice, took a nice shape. But they were break catastrophically that third time we used them. I would stay away from carbon fibre if you can. If you want to make a special study of it and find out all about it, then do that. Go and make a special study of it and see what it's really intended for and why. Do not let people come along and say your racing boat would go better if it had carbon fibre in it. Although people do that very thing, the idea being to tell the owner it's got carbon fibre in it and therefore he's got to pay another £10,000.
I have a question, Carey, a very specific question on task 1, question 2. This is from Rutger, who says, how do I report the condition? My question is, do I make a small report in an official format, or is a description of the general details enough?
Okay, task 1, describe in detail how you report the condition. You are describing in detail, that's what it says, how to report the condition. You're not being asked to actually produce a report like you would for the customer. Well, you can if you want to. If I get one of those, I get half the people to actually do that. They write it as a report. And I don't mind that. I'll just mark that in the usual way. But you're not actually asked to do that. You're asked to describe in detail how you would report the condition. What would you say to somebody so that they knew what you were talking about? Which is a little bit different from how you describe it to the yard manager. Because the customer is not a fiberglass laminator at all. So you'd have to put it in reasonable terms. Is that an answer? I don't know. Is that the answer?
Happy, Rutger? Yes, he says, thank you, Carey. Yeah, very happy.
Okay, there we go. Yes, there he is. Look, he hasn't got a picture.
Ah, you see, we have some shy delegates.
Yes, that's right.
Hi, Carey.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I'm just doing you a favor by leaving the camera switched off.
Oh, I see.
Thanks for that. I do have another question for you.
Go.
Let me see. Let's task 1 question 3. And that's, well, I can actually make it more into a general question. Steel reinforcements within FRP. You know, I would be tempted to just do away with it all and just reinforce it with a polymer of some kind.
You picked on a question that hammers a lot of the students. It causes a lot of students to have to do a resubmission and many other things. Many of them think that the damage in that boat is caused by grounding or an accident. No, that's not true. It's encapsulation of mild steel with GRP laminate. Now, when this boat was built in 1964, does it say? I don't know, I can't remember, 64 or something like that, the resins weren't as good as they are now, and the general level of knowledge wasn't as good as it is now, and there were an awful lot of Arthur Daly's in the trade. Does that mean anything to you?
Well, Arthur Daly means a lot to me because I'm old enough, Carey. It might not mean something to others, but
well,
dodgy visas.
We'd gone through the stage after the war of what we used to call bomb sites, where people used to set up on what was called a bomb site, which is an area where the buildings had been knocked down and it was outstanding empty. And we'd gone into a more developed world altogether, and it was a bit better. But all the same, there were still people who were building boats in their back gardens or in a local shed. There was no heating, there was no proper control or anything like that whatsoever. And they were just trying to knock out a boat as cheap as possible and sell it. And I remember standing near David Still, I shouldn't use his name, but he was standing there beside this boat which was on a trailer, and he had a chap who was a surveyor who was examining it, and the surveyor was poking the side of it with his finger like that, and the laminate went in and out as he poked his finger like that. And I'm going by and I say, what the heck's going on? You can't pass that. I said, you know, it's disgraceful. The thing's going to break the first time you use it. No, they're all right, says the manufacturer. No, we've done lots of them. Oh my God. So people under laminating, under specifying, short-cutting the laminates, all that kind of thing was very usual. And what's happened in this particular case is the boat's gone out there and the owner said, well, I put the boat on its keels, the twin keels. I put the boat on twin keels and you could easily see that it wasn't holding up straight. And so the manufacturer has come along and got somebody, local steelworks, to knock up that frame and glassed it in to break it all up. Right? He used mild steel because in those days stainless steel was 3 times as expensive, 4 times as expensive as mild steel. He could have taken it along and had it hot dip galvanized, which would have been all right. He didn't do that either because that would have cost money. He could have painted it with galvanized paint. It used to be called Galvafroid. It's like good stuff, actually. He didn't do that either. He just glassed it in there. You can't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do not encapsulate plain steel underneath any. You'll have the same trouble with blocks of wood, I can tell you. Do not encapsulate things underneath fiberglass. The water always goes through, always, and whatever is inside will be affected thereby. We used to put thick aluminium plates in, they were all right. And you can put blocks of various different kinds of plastic in there, but not steel, absolutely, because it will rust. When it does rust, the expansion is enormous. And I had all those guys, they were building these flyover motorways in the United States. And what they call the rebars had gone in there as reinforcing and rusted and split the bloody motorway. You'd think, how can it possibly do that? It's only a bit of inch stuff in this huge great thing. Well, it does. There's an enormous amount of pressure when it drops the blood. I hope that helps with that question.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's very clear. So regardless of the quality of steel, it's just better to avoid it altogether.
If you did it with stainless steel, again, you've got to remember that the boat in the question is many decades old.
Absolutely.
It lasted that long. So if you just did a straight repair and did the same blooming mess again, it's going to see the boat and the owner out, right? But if you're going to do something better, it's your own boat or one that you thought, then you either do it in stainless steel, or you do it in steel that is properly galvanized, or you could set off to do it with some sort of, I don't know, foam and laminate over the foam. Yes, that would work if you got it right, but remember that the steel is about 80 times stronger than that. People say, oh, well, when you compare the figures, the laboratory figures for good laminate against a piece of steel, it's only this much. Yeah, well, that's a thing done in a laboratory by scientists with a white coat on. It's not like that in a laminating workshop. Believe you me.
Yeah, no, I believe that. Thank you, Carey. Yeah, steel is still hard to beat, I guess. It's the reason why most of commercial vessels
but
still steel.
Stainless steel is hardly more expensive today than mild steel, and you can weld it very adequately. So if I was to go up to my mate up the road here and asking him to make another one of those, taking the first one as a pattern, say, please knock us up a stainless one, it wouldn't even be that expensive. And it would last for 50 years at least.
Thank you, Carey. Thank you.
The GRP won't, the polyester won't stick to it very well, but it'll cover it over. I don't know, not good practice, is it?
So you have to glass around it.
Glass all around it and glass over it, and make sure the glass has got a hold on it one way or another, mechanically or something.
So you could bolt right through the glass back onto the stainless steel bar.
Yeah. Well, you can see how it was in the picture. I expect you've got the picture.
Yeah, yeah.
As it originally was, it was all right. It did the job.
Yeah. Well, it lasted
over the
so many
years,
years.
water has penetrated through there and it has rusted, and it has expanded and split the whole lot away.
That is how I diagnosed it too. Okay, thank you very much. I'll yield for somebody else. Thank you.
Always nice to hear from you.
Right, any more? Any other questions? Any other observations?
I have one for Carey. Fiberglass repairs in the Caribbean are often done with epoxy because of its superior adhesion to anything.
Yes.
So it's quite common for a osmosis issue or anything else on a structural nature on a boat to be ground out and then fiberglassed over with epoxy resins and epoxy, just to sort of improve the adhesion because of the difficulty of getting any sort of adhesion in an old boat with muck in the bilges and that sort of stuff. Is that something, I got the impression you were advising that you should really use polyester with polyester and epoxy with epoxy as opposed to one with the other?
I'll try to go through that a little bit. If you use polyester in this country, in the UK, our mean average temperature is, I don't know, whatever it is, 14, 13 degrees or something. And you can easily cope with polyester even if you've got it inside a shed. That is, you can get the temperatures reasonable, and then with the right amounts of accelerator and the right amounts of catalyst, the whole thing can be timed so it goes off to suit the lads doing the layups, right?
Right.
You get from this end of the boat to that end of the boat, and then that end is just going off and they start again there, or whatever it might be. If they want it to go more quickly, they will usually, which is a bit naughty, put more catalyst in, but that's not what they should do. What they should do is put accelerator in there, which is sold for that very purpose, and make sure it's thoroughly well mixed. You can't make sure the catalyst is thoroughly well mixed because it go off in the bucket whilst you're doing it. You can put accelerator in there, and that will make it. You can also put inhibitor in there if you like, to make it go off more slowly, right? That's here in England. If you're now going to make boats on the beach in Greece, which people do, the sun comes out and goes on it, the whole lot's hot to the touch. And you really can't mix up, even with a minute amount of catalyst and no accelerator at all. You can't, if you mix up a cupful, you've got to get it out there pretty damn quickly because the smoke will start to come off it almost immediately. Now, in the Caribbean, it's rather the same as that. You need
very much so
that's suitable for the job, and you need to have it inside a nice, reasonable factory unit where somebody is controlling it that knows what they're doing. I have seen an entire drum of resin glow red hot fire, and all the people had to run like mad and ring up the fire brigade. But normally they do it in a potty or in a bucket. potty or a bucket. Potties, you know what a potty is like, it's potty, and a bucket, and they use it like that. If you're laying up a big boat, you need more than that, so you put in a bucket. And they keep going, getting another bucket, another bucket, another bucket, washing hands off the acetone. If you're going to do it with epoxy, again, you need to be familiar with the material. Again, you can add inhibitors, you can add accelerators, and you can add thinners. When we made the sailboards, the material was introduced by a pump. The whole thing was in sealed molds. The whole thing was vacuum infusion, right? And it had to stay not gone off until the infusion had taken place and it got right through the length of the board, if you can imagine that.
Is that not one of the advantages of epoxy, though? The fact that it tends not to go off, it gives you more working time?
The epoxy that you buy, there you are, you're in your place in the Caribbean, and you go down to the local, I don't know, supplier, and he sells you some West system. We used to buy it here, but up the road here, about 35 miles away, there is, I can't think of the three how they're called, but one of the big main epoxy manufacturers, right? And we were always hanging about in there, and they made special epoxy for us, the same as they did for the Lotus guys who were making the rotor blade, right? It was special epoxy, and it was very thin. The stuff for the rotor blades was like lager, like a cup of lager, really thin, but bloody strong for all that. So you can get your epoxy tailored to do pretty much what you want, but it's quite hard if you are buying it in the Caribbean, because it comes from the United States, and the factory out there isn't going to waste their time for a tiny supply like that. They supply it in large drums, reasonably large drums. You can, however, and the rep from the company certainly will offer you inhibitors and accelerators and thinners and thickeners to make it do what you want it to do. If you're going to do those things and you've got all that right, you've got on top of it, it is a far better glue than polyester is. You know, aerodite glues and all these things are extremely good, and that means most times with epoxy. They are very good glues, and they will stick quite well onto a polyester laminate. So that's good, and you'll get a better repair. They are also waterproof.
Right.
The polyester is water absorbent. Epoxy is not. On the other hand, although polyester is not very good for you, and the styrene gets in your lungs, and a little bit of glass gets in your lungs and makes them all scarred like mine, the epoxy is lethal, and the effects of it are cumulative, and over the years they will make you very, very bad indeed. I remember we used to have Charlie Perrin, that was him, Charlie Perrin. If you were to take a cup of epoxy into a large workshop where Charlie Perrin was working, making wooden boats, he was off to the hospital. He'd be in hospital for several days. It's fearsome stuff, and you need to take it seriously. You can mess about with polyester, and people work with polyester all their lives and get away with it, but not epoxy. Dangerous. And then they sue you and you're in some trouble with it. So if you've got lads down there working and it's bloody hot, which it is in the Caribbean, and you sent them out with a container of epoxy to tell them to do this job in a little close hole in the corner there somewhere, force them to wear protective clothing, force them to do it, make them do it. They'll try not to do it. Look, it's too hot in there, or it's inconvenient, or whatever, but damn that, that's what you're going to do. Or you can't go on the job. I'll give you the sack.
Yeah, and it tends to be in inaccessible areas where all these things
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Having said that, you go back to your very first point, and that is that if you're going to do with epoxy, an epoxy repair, you will get a good repair. I'll just make that a bit further. I had a motorbike when I was 16, and I dropped the cylinder head, broke a bit off it. And we repaired it with epoxy, a special kind of epoxy. It's called something metal or something, just to buy in those days. And the bike went on beautifully for another 50,000 miles and never had any trouble at all. That on or the cylinder head.
Mhm.
Idea what you can do with epoxy.
Yeah. Yeah, good to know.
So there you go.
Great, thank you very much.
Haven't you got reps down there that you know?
Oh yeah, we got lots of stuff here. We got carbon
If you're
going on.
you're
We
in
got
touch like
boats being
that,
built.
you are in the happy situation of being able to go and see them do it. Look at the laminate. You can tell
Yeah,
that
they're all
that
friends.
laminator over there is a good guy. That one over there is a lazy what's his name. And you can see what's good and what's bad.
Sorry, lost the audio there for a bit.
I'm sorry, I said you can see the laminators working yourself. You can go down to the yard and go in there and they'll say, here comes Paul, and they'll let you come in the place. Is that right? I've lost you.
He's frozen. His screen's frozen on you.
I think he's gone.
Yeah.
Give us a shout when in a minute or something. I'll click on the audio. Can the rest of you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Are you back, Paul? You froze on our screen, Paul. You're back again. Can you hear us, Paul?
Yeah.
Paul,
I lost the audio.
Yeah.
I lost
Can
the
you
audio.
hear me? I'm saying that you are able, from the sound of it, to be able to go into your yard or local yards, and they'll say, here comes Paul, and they'll recognise you, and they'll let you walk about there and see things going on. So
Yeah,
you can,
very much so.
Excellent. So you can see the laminates being done. You can see the men actually doing the job. You can see how they go about it and what the problems are and all the rest of it. And I have to say, if you're going to be a surveyor, that has to be the best thing. You know, that if you possibly can. Yes.
Great. Good advice. Thank you.
We took a group around the Sunseeker yard in Poole last year. I don't know, 15 of us.
Yep.
And I think every surveyor commented on how thin the hull was.
Yep.
Surprisingly, I don't know why people thought that would be the case, but it was very thin. But it was absolutely invaluable looking around there. We were there all day, and it was a really, really good trip. And it's the sort of thing that I would agree entirely, Kerry. If you can get down to a local yard somewhere and watch that stuff happening, you learn an awful lot.
Robert and John, my dear friends, Robert's died now, I'm very sad to say, ran a very good, tight ship and made very good boats, by the way. And but the whole thing's well organised. I didn't actually welcome people wandering around very much. So you're lucky to have got in there. Yes, the laminates don't look very thick, but I'll take you down into Vosper's and you can see a destroyer being built, or a bit of one. And you'll be horrified when you see how thick the plating is on that thin stuff, 6 1/4 millimeters or something. They fire shells at that. So no, boat hulls are, think of the whole thing as a zeppelin. It's a structure with a thin skin around the outside of it. Now in a basin built, I don't know, small yacht, where fundamentally what you've bought is a bath-shaped moulding, and it's got some structures inside it, but they're not really there for stiffening. They're there to hold the, I don't know, lavatory door up in the right place, that kind of thing. They're strong enough for the job they do, but like the one we were talking about just now that had the steel structure put inside it, for question 1, I think it is. They're not particularly strong, really. Either are the ones, the lifeboat ones. They don't expect to ram into things. If there's a question in Unit 3 about what material to use for making a 200 DWT workboat, and one of the possibilities is you can make one out of GRP. I would not recommend that if I were you, because the thing's only got to, first of all, if you see how the men handle them, the owner will handle it very carefully, but the other will just bash into everything that comes in sight. A good bash will wreck the thing, whereas a steel boat just bounces off. Aluminium boat somewhere between the two, but nonetheless, fiberglass is not good at impact resistance at all. And the next, what fascinating other things would you like to know? How sticky the stuff is, what a nasty smell it is, how the smell goes around with
it's
you.
It's a lovely smell. Probably very bad for you though.
When you go to a Christmas party, the people say, hello, what's that? This mate, and he bloody well put a tin of catalyst in my car, and I didn't know it was there, and I drove off and the tin fell over. And it was a nice new car, and the car still smelled of catalyst 3 years later. Could not get rid of it.
Could see that.
Anybody who doesn't know Catalyst is dangerous. For God's sake, be careful with catalyst. Only handle it with extreme care, with proper gloves on and an apron and all the rest of it. Be aware that it also explodes violently if brought into contact with mineral oil. The IRA could blow places up with a pot of catalyst and a tin of 3-in-1 oil.
Wow.
Carey, I have another question. I have a question from Rutger. In the question PDF, both criteria 1.4 and 3.3 mention the word attachment. However, this word does not feature in the 130-page PDF. Could you please elaborate a bit more on attaching hull appendages and what to look out for, please?
Right. Hull appendages on GRP boats are nearly always included in the hull moulding. That is, the mould has detachable parts or split parts or joint parts or extra parts which the whole thing can be assembled up, and then when they lay it up, they lay up the attachments at the same time. Now, a good example of this is ribs, ribs, RIB. And in order to use the same mold to do several different models, the mold does not have a transom in it, and they have separate transoms which they put in where they think would be handy, plasticine them all in around the edges, and then they make a longer boat or a shorter boat, or what have you. That's a sort of appendage. If you're talking about bilge keels or keels, they ought to be made in as part of the original damn thing. And if that means the blokes have got to get inside there and reach down inside with a long roller, well, then they bloody well have. But do not try and fasten them on afterwards. Although you can make a separate one and fasten it on afterwards mechanically. Load of big bolts, right? Like you stick a lead keel on a wooden boat. It's got great big bolts go all up through. You can bolt on through suitable flanges or whatever it is, but really try and avoid doing that. If you possibly can, it's going to come back and bite you. They should be part of the main hull, and the reinforcement around that area would be quite double the laminate that there is in the rest of the boat. Double. Much thicker. That would be very usual to find the laminate, particularly around the top of the keel, but really all over it, because the keel gets terribly knocked. But quite likely to find the laminate 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick. So they put a lot of glass in. Was that the answer to the question that you wanted?
I guess so, Carey. Yes, thank you. So ideally, you would lay the hull and any appendages at the same time.
If you could.
Yeah, but if you need to attach any appendages later on, it's
you do have to attach skin fittings, like toilet skin fittings, for instance, and other drain things, and they are fastened on mechanically. Right, you bore a hole in the laminate, and then you fit this thing on with lots of bending compound and bolts all around it. Is that okay? You don't see, I mean, never.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if you do have to attach anything to it at a later stage, bolting, just make a mechanical connection would be the preferred
bolt
way.
It right the way through, and be careful what bolts you actually use. If you use stainless steel ones with aluminium, like you might do for, say, trim tabs on a powerboat, you are probably laying up troubles for yourself, because the stainless steel and the aluminium will not get on well together. Looks fine on the day, but it doesn't keep. I don't know, have any of you looked at outboard motors? Have you have friends who got outboard motors, and they, oh my God, look, the screws out, it's gone all white powder. The bloody top comes off the screw when you try to undo it. And you're left, you're absolutely cursed, you can't drill it out, you can't do anything. Bolts right through, choose your material carefully.
Yeah, so stainless steel with FRP.
If you're just bolting 2 bits of GRP together, then stainless steel will be fine. But if you're putting a bronze fitting, like you often get for a toilet outlet, for instance, then you'll have to use a bronze fitting, a bronze screw as well. And there's various different sorts.
Yeah, so, okay. but like any galvanic reaction is not really an issue with FRP. Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Yep, good, good, good. All you surveyors have got to be on top of that, because if you go along and recommend something, in the first place, the yard may not do what you actually said. And the second place, when it goes wrong, you will be blamed. You will be blamed. So it's a good idea to go along when they're doing it and pick the bloody up. So that wasn't what I said. I told you to do it like this, which may get you a bit of a barney with the manager, but you'll see. You know, stick with it. Stick to your guns. Insist.
Yep.
That's good advice, Carey. Stick to your guns. I got a question from Vangelis. Surface corrosion on tow rail bolts is a concern of water ingress at the hull to deck joint. Question.
Correct. Hull to deck joints. Hull to deck joints are, I suppose you'd say, a source of trouble. There are several different kinds which you can read about in Hugo Plessy's books, but there are biscuit tin ones, there are flange ones, and various other ones that people use in order to get it done very, very quickly for the least amount of money. With a chap walking around the boat with a machine that goes bzz, bonk, bzz, bonk, bzz, bonk, like that. Horrible. If you then drive the boat into a wall, which is not as difficult as they sound, it very greatly stresses the area where that is. It cracks the fiberglass internally, and that may lead to difficulties in the future. I'm now not answering the question that I was asked. I'm sorry about that. I've rambled on, as my family often say I do. What was the case? What was exactly you wanted to know, Vangelis?
Let me turn up the question again. Surface corrosion on tow rail bolts is concern of water ingress at the hull to deck joint. Question.
The great advantage of the hull to deck joint is it's 3 feet above the water surface or more. So it's not usually subjected to underwater surface water pressure. It's splash, which might be considerable splash, but splash, waves, rain, all that kind of thing. If you get a leak there, which you do because the fastenings break down, or it was driven into a wall, or it wasn't very well done in the first place, or whatever. If you get a leak there, that will appear in the people's upholstery on the inside, which is bad news. Now, it's probably not your fault. It was the yard that did it, not you. But you may get called in as a surveyor to say there's a problem here. What's the reason? Well, what's the reason is that the I don't know, pot rivet, bolt, screw, whatever was used to bang the joints together.
I mean,
sorry,
for example, through bolted aluminium to rail in an inward flange hull to deck joint, for example. I saw surface corrosion around the bolts and the aluminium to rail. I mean, is this risky for a water ingress inside to hull to deck joint?
If you have corrosion around the hull to deck joint, it's usually associated with the stanchions which are above it up on the deck. However, you can get corrosion there, and it's because the wrong fittings were used. I'm sorry, that's it, all about it. And taking the fittings out and putting new ones in is not an easy task.
Yeah.
But the yard that do it, you've got to remember, I get an awful lot of students who are carried away with the enthusiasm, as I was when I was young, of high performance boats and making high performance boats and getting the best performance out of boats. The yard managers and the yard management do not think like that at all. Sometimes they do make them like that, especially for a special, but that's not how their minds work. They are trying to make the cheapest possible boat to sell in a showroom. That is what they think they are trying to do. So they will always look for something that's a bit cheaper or something that isn't as expensive, because they have the devil on their back in the form of the bank and the income tax people and various other creditors. Their lives are a misery because of it. Can
I add something to the discussion? I've come across a lot of particularly Benetou's yachts, which have a aluminum, extruded aluminum tow rail held down with stainless steel bolts.
Yep.
And there's always, over time, there's always corrosion.
Yep.
Because it's still the metals, the head goes on to the aluminum. And as the anodizing breaks down, you get more and more pitting of the aluminum, which technically, yeah, it's just an age thing. I don't think it particularly adds to the leakage potential of the joint unless it actually corrodes to the point where the bolt head goes right through and no longer actually compresses the joint.
I haven't got it in my head at the moment, but in that book there about corrosion behind me, it tells you all about that. If you use stainless steel with aluminium in salt water, which gets splashed onto it, corrosion must happen. It's a natural chemical reaction. And, and you get this whitish powder, which every surveyor comes to know. And you go to undo the screw or the bolt and the head comes off. Because just underneath the head, it's gone away right, it's necked right out.
Yeah.
It's a curse, because you can't put another fitting here, you can't do a bloody thing. Now, what else could you possibly do? Well, you can't use aluminium fittings. They're not strong enough by a million miles.
Correct.
You can't use bronze. That would be a great deal worse. So they're stuck with it. I suppose if it was your own personal boat, your boat, Paul's boat, or any one of you, you would take all those fittings out once a year, replace them with new ones, and soak them in grease. That would work, but you know that over there in America, Johnson's and Evinrude's and Mercury's and all that, they've been cracking out outboard motors all since the war. And this problem has stayed with them ever since. That you go to try and dismantle an outboard motor, no, you can't do that. The owner says it's your fault. And,
impact tools is what you got to use.
Well, if you hit it with impact tool, the head comes off the thing straight away. Now you've got a hard piece of stainless steel embedded in an aluminium casting. And if you try and drill the hard piece of stainless steel out,
that's a nightmare.
The drill just moves straight off it. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So, curse. A very good point, and there is at this time no particular cure for it. Many of you will come across this in rigging when you go to look at people's rigging. Overwhelmingly, people's masts nowadays are aluminium extrusions, and overwhelmingly they are fastened together with pot rivets and screws. The screws are stainless steel, and you get exactly that problem. There's quite enough salt in the air up at the masthead for it to work. You get a stainless steel masthead fitting or a winch fitting or whatever it is, boom fitting, wrapped around an aluminium mast section, and you get poultice corrosion underneath it that go right through the metal altogether.
Yeah.
And the next.
Very wonderful stuff. Anyone got any other final points to carry? Otherwise, I think we've taken up enough of your time, which we are very appreciative.
I write several letters a week to lads like your good selves and lasses, answering queries. Don't hesitate to get in touch with me and ask. I won't tell you the answer, but I'll tell you where to look for it.
Lorna, before we close out, anything you want to say to those who assembled today?
No, just as Carey said, obviously he gets a lot of emails that I send him every week. So if you ever have any questions, please just email me and I can forward it on to, or not just this module, I can forward it on to any assessor. And they're always pretty quick at getting back to me. So they'll just help as much as they can. So don't sit there thinking that you're in this alone, because we're here to help.
I didn't make that clear. You're not supposed to enter, you can do whatever you like, but you're not supposed to contact your assessor directly and pay them some money to pass you through the thing without you having to do anything. You're not supposed to contact me directly. You're supposed to contact Lorna and she will send it through. And when I send my reply, I always send a copy to her. And she could, if she felt so inclined, or might look to see if I'm doing the job properly. You're supposed to go through the office so that we keep the files up to date and keep on top of, keep the trail so that when you come back to see us in 6 years' time, it looks back and say, oh, that was what that was all about.
So to close out with, Carey, I've got a question from Edward. The drills in the keel mouldings of the cap, let's say to provide the support for the holding tanks, did let some water to escape, quite a stinky water. Not much, perhaps a litre or two. Considering the boat is afloat and no more water is getting out, what would you suggest to the surveyor?
I haven't quite understood that.
Okay. You want to read it again?
What we're saying is that there's stinky water in the bilges underneath the tank. Is that what we're saying?
I don't know, Edward. Is that what you're asking? You can nod. There we are. Come online.
Yeah. The thing is, I did install the tanks on the cat I'm working for now. And when I did it, there was some, let's say, some water getting out. And that water did stink and being, let's say, I tasted it. not seawater, but like sour water, I'd say.
Was this water between the tank and the mountings, whatever they are?
It's the molding of the keel. Those are the moldings of the keels in the cat. On the
this water is rainwater that's seeped in down the years, and it has got bacteria in it, as all water does. It's picks up bacteria and germs, what have you, out of the air as it comes along, and it can actually percolate through the laminate. But in this particular case, it's almost certainly come in through a fitting somewhere or other, or possibly some damage or something. But anyway, water, I don't know, might be still left over when the boat was built in the first place. It's got water down in there, and it is ditch water, and that's what it smells like. Does that sound right? You have to mop it out, wash it out, clean it out, spray it with a bit of disinfectant, and do that the same again in 10 years' time when it happens again.
Okay,
thank you. Ask you why it is, say, it leaks in there from somewhere, I don't know. You can have a water tank that drips, it's not at all unusual.
Thank you, Carey. Thank you, Edward, for your question. Thank you, Mark, for your kind comments. Mark wants to send his best wishes to Carey. So it's been great to see you all aboard. Lorna, I don't know what else we have lined up.